Om Ganati Marandasya Ganagana Sakya Chaksudindri Chamyana Tajmai Sigurvedanhan. Maom Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutare. Shrimadi Bhaktivedanta Swami Tanamani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachani. Nivashes Vinyodi Prasthina Desadani. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gora Govinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. I want to talk to you today about outlasting the opposition. We all have things, I think you'll agree with me, that come against us in life. People aren't fair. We're dealing with an illness, a pandemic. Our business is slowed down. We're praying, we're believing, we're doing the right thing, but it just doesn't seem like anything is changing for the better. It's easy at that time to get discouraged and to think that it's never going to improve, that where I am now is where I'm always going to be. Can I tell you that the way you win some battles is not necessarily by defeating the opposition, but by what? Outlasting. You guys are a sharp crowd. Yeah. Outlasting the opposition. For that you have to have staying power. You can't be weak and give up because it's not happening the way you want it to happen and on your timetable. Some enemies are stubborn. You have to outlast that trouble at work. You have to outlast that pandemic. Outlast that difficulty in your marriage. Outlast that slow season in your finances. You want Krishna or God to deliver you from the attack, but if He's not changing it, it's real simple. You have to just outlast the attack. Sometimes we feel that God's just gone away, or taken a coffee break, or forgotten about us. We've seen Him turn situations around in the past, but this problem seems like it's never going to go away. Seems like my mother-in-law's never going to move out. Well, our message is that Krishna is still going to turn it around, but this time He's going to do it in a different way. You have to have a holy determination, a made-up mind, where you dig in your heels and say, I'm in it for the long haul. Quitting is not an option. I'm going to outlast the sickness. I'm going to outlast the addiction. I'm going to outlast the injustice. This is what in the epic Mahabharata, the great king Yudhisthira, the eldest of the Pandavas, did. God favored him in the manner of his birth. He was the rightful heir to the throne of the known world at that time, the firstborn son of King Pandu, the legitimate heir. And indeed, he became a king who was a father to his citizens, a hero to his constituency. He performed the Rajasuya sacrifice, which had not been performed by any king in thousands and thousands of years. To do that, it took untold amounts of wealth, influence, and a worldwide sovereignty. Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God Himself, descended from the spiritual world, attended the spectacular event as a guest of honor. Yudhisthira had it all. Seems like he was untouchable. But there was another man named Duryodhana. Duryodhana was jealous of Yudhisthira. He could see God's favor on Yudhisthira's life, and he resented it like anything. In spite of Duryodhana's jealousy, you might have thought that Krishna would preserve the status quo. If it's not broke, don't fix it, right? The king was just, the citizens were happy. Things couldn't be better. It's like Camelot. And yet Krishna allowed Duryodhana to upset the apple cart by cheating Yudhisthira and his brothers of their entire kingdom in a crooked game of dice. Now, why couldn't God or Krishna have left well enough alone? The answer is that God doesn't do things in the way that we expect. If you could predict what God does, then He would be a pretty small, tiny God. For some victories, we, from our side, have to prove that we're going to do the right thing even when the wrong thing is happening. We have to be good to people when they're not being good to us. We have to stay in faith even when it's unfair, when it's taking longer than we thought, when it's not turning out like we would like it to turn out. Question is, how badly do you want what God promised you? If you give up easily, it means you didn't want it that badly. If you let people talk you out of it, if you let bad breaks discourage you or delays cause you to quit believing, it's going to keep you from Krishna or God's best. Now, there are two kinds of faith, delivering faith and sustaining faith. Delivering faith is when Krishna instantly turns it around. You don't have to wait. You don't have to endure. Krishna suddenly shows out in your life. Now, we believe in delivering faith. We've seen that, but most of the time, we're going to need sustaining faith. And that's when Krishna doesn't solve the difficulty, but he takes us through the difficulty. He doesn't put out the fire, but he takes us through the fire, during which time we might get a little bit hot. He could stop it from happening, turn it around, put out the fire before we get in it, change it in an instant. He's God, but if he did that every time, our faith would never develop. Our faith would never grow like it should. Something happens in the struggle when our mind is telling us it's never going to work out, but in our hearts we know what Krishna or God promised us is on the way. Your mind tells you you're wasting your time. There's no use even believing, but you just keep on keeping on stubbornly. You keep on trusting Krishna. You keep on thanking him that it's on the way. That's called sustaining faith. Don't expect everything to be easy. Don't expect every person to be for you. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. The victory is on the other side of the mountain, the other side of the opposition. For you, it takes staying power, a made-up mind. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Our spiritual master Prabhupada would often cite the story of the fight for the Bombay land on which a beautiful temple today sits as evidence that a person in Krishna or God consciousness can outlast the opposition. For almost 2 years, he struggled to secure this piece of land in Juhu, a very exclusive area for Krishna's temple. It was an ordeal, a test of patience, a challenge of courage. But because Prabhupada never got bewildered by Maya or crestfallen by the circumstances, he ended up outlasting the opposition. The story was that Mr. and Mrs. Nair had taken a large down payment from some of Prabhupada's disciples for this prime piece of land in Juhu. The problem was Mr. and Mrs. Nair had a swindle going on and had taken down payments a half a dozen previous time from prospective buyers, and then had found some way to force them to forfeit, in which case they kept the down payment. So they had a nice little scheme going on where they were making money hand over fist on the same piece of land. They were able to defraud prospective buyers because they were very wealthy and they were extremely well connected with the Bombay police and the politicians. Now, Prabhupada had neither a lot of money nor political influence, but he had a lot of faith in Krishna. Krishna sustained him through a 2-year battle, after which Mr. Nair lost his life in a heart attack, and Mrs. Nair apologized for her wrongdoings and ended up selling him the land at 1/3 of its market value. Giriraj Swami, who just came out with a book on the subject, remembers the night that the papers were finally signed. Quote, "The room was hushed during the signing, and everybody felt as if a momentous event was taking place, just as if 2 world powers were signing a treaty. After Mrs. Nair signed the document, at this point she started to cry. Tamal Krishna Goswami quietly asked her why she was crying. She said, I was remembering all the events that had taken place, all the times that we had wronged your Swamiji and tried to cheat him, culminating in the death of my husband. Prabhupada looked over at her kindly and compassionately as if he understood her heart. He said, "Don't worry. Through you, Krishna was testing our determination. You are just like my daughter. I will always take care of you." Giriraj writes, it was very intense, the culmination of years of struggle. So for Prabhupada and the devotees, Prabhupada's well-wishers, their dreams and desires and efforts were being fulfilled. A tenant on the Hare Krishna land, Mrs. Warrior, she says that the devotees were all saying Jai, which means victory, after the signing, and all of them were very happy. Prabhupada sat down and he gave a lecture about the Bombay project. He gave an idea to all the people of how it would be marble. There wouldn't be a single thing in the temple that wasn't built of marble. Some were asking, Prabhupada, how is it possible for everything to be marble? Prabhupada said that Krishna is the unlimited Lord. For him, everything can be possible and will be possible. As he sat there that evening after acquiring the land, visualizing the project, Giriraj Swami writes, everyone was thrilled to hear the way he was describing, like one of the 7 wonders of the world. People would be attracted from all over the world to come and see it. It would be a landmark in Bombay. Prabhupada explained the whole project as he saw it in his mind's eye, and he said that after it was constructed, it would be more than we could visualize. It would be more than we could dream or even think of. And then, after the late feast, when everyone had departed, Prabhupada returned to his room. Leaning back at his desk, he smiled and he exclaimed, "It was a good fight." Would you agree that it's easy to be disrespectful to people when they're being disrespectful to us? It's easy to reflexively want to vindicate ourselves. Here's my big chance to pay them back, get even, make them look bad. After all, they did it to me. No. Stay on the high road. Let Krishna be your vindicator. Let him pay your enemies back. He sees everything. He sees the injustice. He sees the wrongs. If you'll just leave it up to Krishna or God, he will vindicate you better than you can vindicate yourself. When you let Krishna fight your battles, he'll get you to where you're supposed to be. Some of the challenges that you're facing, things that are not changing, you're being your best. Still, it's not improving. You have to be like Yudhisthira, outlast the opposition. Don't worry about defeating the enemy. If you'll just outlast it, you'll see the victory. Krishna will take care of your Duryodhanas. Just keep honoring God and you won't even have to fight. Krishna will move the wrong people out of the way, open doors you couldn't open, turn that situation in your health around. Now, our encouragement is outlast the sickness, outlast the loneliness, outlast that professor who seems to have it in for you, outlast that trouble at work. You have to tap into your staying power. Scripture says, he who endures to the end will receive the prize. Don't give up in the middle. Don't get discouraged because it's not happening as fast as you would like. Your time is coming. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Some of you history students might be familiar with the name William Wilberforce. An Englishman, he gave his life to fighting slavery. The battle consumed 46 years of his life. Why? Because there was huge economic and political opposition to his work. Having slaves to do your back-bending work was very profitable for a great many successful people. The cause of abolishing the slave trade was defeated 11 times in the British Parliament before it was finally passed in 1807. Slavery itself was not defeated decisively in Britain until 3 days before Wilberforce died in 1833. On top of his huge opposition, Wilberforce, I don't know if you know it, had health issues. He had to deal with bad eyes, ulcerated bowels, and a curvature of the spine so bad that without a brace, his head would have been permanently sitting on his chest. And yet, you know, at his funeral, when people eulogized William Wilberforce, what they talked about over and over and over again? Can you guess? It was his joy. One man said he was a most cheerful Christian. No gloomy atmosphere of melancholy or moroseness surrounded him. His sun appeared to be always shining. Wilberforce himself believed that joy was, quote, an injunction strongly enforced in the New Testament, unquote. So are you frustrated over what's not changing fast enough for you? You're praying, you're believing, and it's still not improving. You can't pray it away. You can't make it work out. Then you have to outlast it. It's time to trust Krishna's timing. God knows what he promised you. He hasn't forgotten about it. He knows what he put in your heart. And at the right time, when it's optimally good for you, then it's going to come to pass. I wonder tonight how many of you are upset about an enemy that Krishna is causing to be stubborn. You're frustrated. You're agitated. Krishna's not letting it turn around yet. You think it should have turned around long time ago. Why is that? Because he's using that situation to catapult you to a whole new level. All you can see down where you are is nothing is improving. But what you can't see is what Krishna is about to do. What's on the schedule, the doors that are going to open, the healing, the vindication, the favor, the promotion is coming. And yes, you may have some stubborn enemies, but the good news is they're not too stubborn for your God. He wouldn't have allowed it if it wasn't meant to bring you out better than you were before. Now you have to get your fire back. Dig your heels in a little bit deeper. Show the enemy that you're more determined than he is. Krishna did not bring you this far to leave you. He didn't let Duryodhana steal the kingdom because Duryodhana was more powerful. Krishna was setting it all up to show his power in the lives of his devotees, the Pandavas. He allowed the opposition of Duryodhana not to stop them, but the end of the story was victory. The end of the story was promotion. We're talking about those faithful, determined devotees of the Lord 5,000 years later in Spanish Fork, Utah. If that doesn't show the power of God, I don't know what does. So what are we saying? You have to be more stubborn in your faith than the stubborn things that come against you. That pandemic may be stubborn. Can't seem to get over it. That's okay. We're more stubborn than the pandemic. We will live and not die. Father, thank you that healing is coming. Thank you that the number of my days you will fulfill. That financial difficulty, those student loans just won't go away. Been losing sleep for years and years over it. Can I tell you, God put in you more stubbornness than that which comes against you. He predicted that in due course of time you'll lend and not borrow. So go ahead and thank him, Lord, that my abundance is coming my way, that what I touch will prosper and succeed. Alice Gray tells about a man who was in a terrible accident. In a matter of seconds, this man's world was turned upside down. The accident resulted in the loss of both his legs and one arm. Well, instead of wallowing in self-pity, the man resolved to look for ways to encourage other hurting people. He began writing letters to a local prison. Each letter was full of hope and faith, all that this man could muster. And yet he never knew whether anybody was reading the letters. Prison policy did not allow the prisoners to write back. Occasionally, he was tempted to stop writing. What good was it really doing? But one day, this man received a letter from a prison guard who censored the prisoner's mail. Here's what the guard wrote. Please, from now on, write on the best paper you can afford. Why? Because your letters are passed from cell to cell, from man to man, until they literally fall to pieces. What do we know from that? This man's letters were appreciated by the prisoners. He was helping, but the person he ended up helping most of all was himself. Every time the opposition tells you no, You need to go back and to tell it yes one more time. Don't let the enemy have the last word. Keep speaking faith over your life, declaring favor. Keep calling yourself blessed, healthy, strong, victorious. Right now, some of you may be facing and have been facing situations that look like they're never going to work out. Krishna is saying to you tonight, he brought you here tonight to tell you the same thing he said to other heroes of faith throughout the millennium. That depression, you're about to see it no more. That's not your destiny. That struggle in your finances, can't seem to get ahead, you're about to see that enemy of lack no more. Krishna is about to release you into abundance. That sickness that's hindering you, the addiction, the loneliness, the anxiety, you might as well have a going away party because you're not going to see them anymore. This is a new day. Krishna's doing a new thing. Now you need to keep this tenacity in your spirit. Now is not the time to be weak and slack off, to get worn down. You've been armed with strength for every dawn. You're not weak. You are well able to outlast what's trying to stop you. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Finish up here with a moving story about a man named Bill. When Bill was born in the 1930s, he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. The doctor predicted that he was mentally retarded and urged Bill's parents to have him institutionalized. Fortunately, they ignored the doctor's advice, and first Bill attended a school for children with disabilities, and later he gained entrance to a mainstream high school. That was an unusual accomplishment for a physically challenged person of that era. And then, with the help of a counselor, Bill began looking for a career. That effort resulted in a whole series of humiliations. A job at a pharmacy store lasted less than a day because Bill's trembling hands would not allow him to stock the shelves neatly. As a Goodwill Industries cashier, Bill only lasted 3 days because his palsied fingers kept hitting the wrong keys. His physical limitations also brought a job at the Salvation Army docks to a quick end, and his slurred speech soon lost him a job answering phones at the Veterans Rehabilitation Center. After 5 months of one humiliation after another, his counselor told Bill he was unemployable, suggested that he stay home and collect disability. Now, another person in Bill's position might have taken this advice to heart, but Bill was different. Bill knew deep down in his heart that he could be a productive member of society, even if he couldn't tie his own shoes without difficulty or button his own shirt cuffs. Having exhausted his patience with state counselors, Bill began combing the want ads himself. And then that just met with a whole bunch more rejections. Most times he didn't even get past the initial phone call. And one day, Bill landed an interview with a company, Watkins Products, that sold household cleaning products door to door. Bill said, I know I can do this job. Now don't forget, this is 1961, decades before disability laws, when tolerance for people who are different was very low. Bill got his break, but prejudice being what it is, the sales manager assigned Bill to the worst, most hopeless territory in Portland, where people lived in dire poverty and the houses were falling apart. And the poor man was working on a commission, but he had a job. He packed his briefcase with brochures, hit the street his first day at 9 a.m., and hasn't looked back since. Eventually, Bill Porter went on to become one of the top salesmen in the history of Watkins Products and the top salesman ever in the Northwest. ABC's 2020 told Bill's story to the nation on Christmas Eve, 1995, and it was later dramatized into an HBO movie starring William H. Macy. Bill Porter's perseverance and positive thinking have had an impact on many people. As one of his many fans wrote, Quote, I once read that the quality of one's life is not measured by the things that one acquires, but by the lives that one touches. Bill Porter touched many lives, not the least of which was his own. So when you, in your life, have done everything that you know how to do, you've done your best to get well, you've treated people good that haven't been good to you, you worked hard, but you haven't seen the increase that you're hoping for, what do? Do you get discouraged? Do you give up? Do you think it wasn't meant to happen? Do you throw in the towel? No. Just stand. Standing is trusting God. Standing is knowing that He's in control. When you're standing, you're not frustrated by what's not happening. You're not complaining about how long it's taken. You're in peace. You're at rest. You know what Krishna started in your life, He's going to finish. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Scripture says, stand firm, be immovable. That means you're not moved by the pandemic. You're not moved by the medical report. You're not moved by how your child is acting. You're not moved by the contract that didn't go through. You're steadfast. You keep believing. You keep thanking Krishna. Keep doing your best. Quitting is not an option. Giving up is not in your mindset. You know that what Krishna has promised you is on the way. It hasn't happened yet. No big deal. I'm going to keep standing. Somebody asks you, are you still believing to get well? You've had that sickness a long time. I saw the medical report. What are you going to do? I'm going to stand. I'm going to keep trusting Krishna. I'm going to keep thanking Him that healing is coming. I'm going to keep declaring that I'm healthy, whole, and strong. Well, how long are you going to stand? I'm going to stand until I see what Krishna promised come to pass. Krishna's looking for people that have a stubborn faith. Anybody can get discouraged. Anybody can say, no, it's not going to happen. But if you are going to reach your destiny, you have to make up your mind. You're going to stand no matter what comes against you and no matter how long it takes. Yudhisthira, the righteous king, outlasted betrayals, arson, being lied about. He was cheated of his kingdom unfairly and had to go to exile in the forest for 13 years. He had plenty of opportunities to give up. He could have said, Krishna, it's not fair. All these things have come against me. But instead, he had stubborn faith. He wasn't moved by the opposition, not by the bad breaks or by how unfair it was. He just kept standing. He went on to endure the 13 years of exile and retake the kingdom after a great battle. Now, we need to say, like Yudhisthira, none of these things move me. I'm not moved by the economy. I'm not moved by what's not working out. I have a made-up mind. I'm going to keep standing, keep trusting, keep believing. I'm going to outlast what's trying to stop me. This is one time that it's good to be stubborn. You're not going to be talked out of what Krishna or God put in your heart. And when life tries to push you down, step on your dream, squash your health, you got to outlast what's trying to defeat you. Why and how? The power in you is greater than the power that's trying to stop you. Scripture says a good person falls down 7 times but gets back up again. You have comeback power. Krishna would not have allowed the adversity if it was going to finish you off. It's just another stop on the way to your destiny. Some of you might remember the Broadway play Zorba the Greek. You might remember that in the village where Zorba lived, people had worked for months to build a much-needed aqueduct which would bring water to the village. If they completed this important project, it would be the beginning of a new future and a new prosperity for that village. However, as you know, when the time came that the project was almost completed, a great tragedy occurs. The whole thing collapses. It's clearly a troublesome, soul-searching moment. How does Zorba react? Do any of you remember how Zorba begins to perform a dance that expresses his defiance of the disaster? And one by one, the people of the village begin to join in the dance, also affirming that this troublesome moment will not defeat them. It's as though they are saying, we will not be a victim of circumstances. We will rise victorious over the circumstances. Despair will not find a place in our hearts, not find a place in our souls. We're going to focus on what we can do. We're not going to wallow in self-pity. That dance provides the energy for them to outlast defeat on their way to victory. Some of the challenges that you're facing today, some of the things that bother you, that cause you to lose sleep at night, cause you to wonder why it's not changing, Krishna's not asking you today to overcome it. He's just asking you to outlast it. It's all a part of his plan, necessary to get you to your destiny. Yes, the opposition may be stubborn, things may not be improving, yet stay encouraged. God is still in control. He still has you in the palm of his hand. Now do your part. Keep standing. Don't be moved by what's not changing. Have this stubborn faith. If you do this, like with Yudhisthira, like with Prabhupada, like with all great heroes of faith, things are going to suddenly turn in your favor. What looked impossible, unreachable, too far away, suddenly that dream, that healing, that restoration, suddenly it did a 180-degree turn. Suddenly it's no longer going away from you. Suddenly it's coming back in your direction. Why? Because you outlasted the opposition. Get ready. Promotion, healing, vindication, new levels, the fullness of your destiny are coming after you in this life. And next life, you go back to home, back to God. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.